listening to Consulting to Win with your host, Ralph White.
Welcome. You're listening to New Day Talk Radio, where every day is a new day.
Good morning and welcome to Consulting to Win Radio, where we bring the best in business coaching to you live every Wednesday from 11 to 12 a.m. on newdaytalkradio.com. I'm your host, Leanne Farmer, and I'm also a consultant on staff at Possibilities Unlimited. And Possibilities Unlimited is the business consulting firm that wants you to win in the game of business life. In our studio today, we have our president of Possibilities Unlimited. To us, he needs no introduction, but I will introduce him to you, our listeners, Ralph White. He is one of the most innovative and experienced business coaches in the country. Good morning, Ralph.
Good morning, Leanne.
And also joining us this morning for the first time on Consulting to Win Radio is our esteemed colleague, coach, and health and fitness expert, Mary Mullenhoff. Mary, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Ralph.
I'd like to tell you guys a little bit about Mary because she has enjoyed a unique path to personal success throughout her career. Mary has a Bachelor of Science degree from Cornell, and she started her career in the accounting and consulting industry, working for Ernst & Young, and spent a good deal of time in that area, and then decided she would follow her passion. She left the accounting field and decided she was going to become a personal trainer. And Mary's going to be able to tell us a little bit about how all this ties together and what it has to do with our topic of the day, which is time management. So, Mary, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and how you came to this place in your career?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'd like to mention is that when I was at Ernst & Young, I worked a lot in the Entrepreneur of the Year program, and what it was is like the Academy Awards of Entrepreneurs. So really got to meet a lot of the top echelon business people. And what was interesting with them is when I asked them the secret to their success, most of the time it had to do with the fact that they could put everything into their lives. They managed their time properly. They had success at work, they had success with their families, they had success with their extended families, with their kids, personally with themselves. And so that's always sort of stayed with me. And when I went over into the personal training world, many of my clients are very successful entrepreneurs, and many of them are entrepreneurs who have success in one part of their lives and not in others. Also, some of them happen to be, say, homemakers who have given up the business side of life and devoted their entire time to their children. What's interesting with that is a lot of those people, that's all they do. And even though you think, they have so much time to do so much, they give up themselves. And so I think this whole concept of time management is really critical for everybody. And what I like about the this matrix that Ralph has developed is that it really does go there. It covers every aspect. He's not your typical business coach who's just looking at the business side of things. He's looking at business, life, personal, everything. And so that's what makes this a very exciting.
And we're going to get into more of what Mary's talking about in just a little bit. We're glad to have you here with us today, Mary. We're so glad she's on staff. She brings a lot of life and energy and new ideas to everything we're doing at Possibilities Unlimited. Just want to remind you folks, the purpose of our show, Consulting to Win Radio, is to give you, the listener, an opportunity to experience what it's like to work with a business coach. I know a lot of people have never considered bringing in outside support to help them create new ideas and incredible results in their businesses. But that's what our company, Possibilities Unlimited, works with people to do. And on this radio show, we want to provide an hour of access to that powerful resource so that you, the listener, can address the challenges in your business and take some positive actions to get you where you want to be. So I want to also direct you to our website, www.consultingtowin.com. That's consulting, the number 2, win.com, if you want to learn more about us. And I invite you to call into the program today at 310-715-6709. That's 310-715-6709, and you'll be able to talk with Ralph and Mary. We're going to talk about something, Mary touched on it, that affects all of us, every single person, and that is time management. It affects everybody because we live our lives in time. And our lives happen in time, and our businesses happen in time. And no matter what we do, we never seem to have enough time to finish all our business and personal projects. And so because this is, again, something that affects every one of us, we would love to hear from you, our listeners, at 310-715-6709. Ralph and Mary are here, and they can take your calls. So, Mary, I want to start with you. What are some of the challenges you see in business time management? You already spoke to a couple of them.
Well, actually, what I'd like to do is I've come up with a list of questions that I've been dying to ask Ralph.
Oh, great.
And
Great.
I thought I'd
All
handle
right.
this more like a little interview. And so, Ralph, one of the main things, he's developed this whole life matrix, which has a number of quadrants. And one of them is the managing time quadrant. And what I wanted to do is ask Ralph basically what the basic elements of managing time are.
Well, it's a critical aspect of your business. And, people say, I don't have enough time. And really, all we have is time. You're born, you have time, and then you die. So it's really a critical thing to look at, managing your time. And I look at, the four elements of managing your time are, one, I call a radar screen. Two is a task collector. Three is putting things in time. And four, determining what you're not going to do. Those are the four basic elements of managing time.
Well, I'd like to follow up with that and ask you how you developed this whole life matrix for managing time.
Well, it's something that I've been working on it and looking at it. I've tried a lot of different seminars. I've done a lot of different programs. I've tried not managing my time. I've tried keeping it in my head. I've taught a lot of different programs, and so I've sort of combined a lot of the things that I've learned, and taken some from each of them, and put it together is in this model that I'm building. And is to use it as to what I feel will best suit my clients in getting the job done.
Okay, so there's this area in here, and one of the quadrants says is called the determine what not to do. Why is it important to determine what not to do?
Well, the reality of life is there's more things to do than we're ever going to get done. People think if I work a little faster, if I prioritize, if I had for myself, when I first started the process back in, I'd say back prior to 1985, I didn't have a time management system. I really operated with everything in my head. I tried to remember, I was running my business. Basically, I felt I was the owner, and that, since I was the owner, people would wait for me. And that, which is kind of an arrogant way to run your life. Don't recommend it. And I kind of decided that I needed a system. So I started looking at, day timers and different, calendars and what have you. And I started out with a little tiny calendar, and I found out that I couldn't fit my life into those little 1-inch squares in my programs and what have you. And then I went to a bigger day timer, and I still couldn't get it in. Everything I was planning in that, and then I went to a bigger day timer, and then I couldn't get everything that I was doing in that, and then I started on computer programs, and then I started with the lists. I found this computer program that automatically rolled over your to-do list into the next day, so it's like computerized, moved things forward for you, which just kept making this list get longer and longer and longer, and then I kept trying to fit all my to-do list into 2 hours a day.
Okay, so how did you say, okay, this is now a not to-do list? How did you get there?
Well, when I found out that one day I sit down and I realized that no matter how hard I worked at it, I couldn't get my to-do list done. And I sit down and I added up I decided how long is it going to take to get this list done? And I added up the time for how much each of the items on the list was going to take. And I found out I was trying to put 37 hours worth of work into a 2-hour time slot. And it pretty much determined from that I was never going to accomplish that. So I needed to look at some of the things on the list just wasn't going to get done. So I started looking at and saying, okay, I had to decide really what wasn't going to get done. You know, the reality is there's more things to do than you're ever going to get done. And if you start looking at them and dividing them up and choosing, you know, the frustration in life comes from you're living in hope that somehow you're going to get everything done. If you give that up and actually choose, I'm not going to do that.
Give up living in hope.
Give up living in hope, yes. And actually choose to not do things. Now, that means, so now I have this list of like something like between 500 and 600 things that I'm not going to do. Now, that doesn't mean I'm never going to do them. It just means I'm choosing at this time not to do them. I may put them in my calendar in the future and do them, but at this time I'm choosing not to do them. Now, the calendar is what it fits into what I call my radar screen, because the radar screen is how you keep something in front of you. In other words, in order to, if I'm doing something, the one thing that's always present when you're going to do something is time. If you're going to do something, the one ingredient that's always present is a period of time. So if that's the case, if I'm doing something, I'm going to schedule it in my calendar. If I'm not going to do it, it belongs on a list of things I'm not doing. If I'm going to do it, I should schedule it in my calendar. So,
can you give us an example?
Well, of something I'm doing?
Of both.
Well, something I'm doing is this radio show every Wednesday from 11 to 12. So that's scheduled in my calendar ongoingly. It's a repetitive appointment in my Outlook calendar, because I use Outlook for a calendar, so I schedule it in repetitively, because I don't have an ending date on it yet, so it's actually scheduled in there repetitively. It's something I'm doing. So that would be on the list of things I'm doing.
What about on the other list?
On the other list is probably about 100 books that I'm not reading. The people have suggested, Ralph, this is a really good book, and it sounds really good. You know, oh, Ralph, you should read this book. And I'm like, oh, yes, that sounds really good. So then I write it down on the list of things I'm not doing, so I'm comfortable with, you know, that's where it belongs.
It went somewhere. Okay.
Right.
So it's your own personal filing system.
It's my personal filing system. So it's a way of sorting things that instead of putting it on a to-do list, like I should read that book, then I'd feel frustrated because like Mary recommended I read this book, and I thought it was a good idea, and then I put it on the to-do list, and then every time I looked at it, it would be a book that Mary suggested I read, or Dr. Jim suggested. Oh, and by the way, last week after listening to Dr. Jim's show for 2 weeks and how interesting he was, I decided to go see him, and so he's a very interesting doctor. I recommend everybody go see him. He is a very interesting office and a very, very talented doctor. So he has the show on before us. But if he recommended a book for me to read, and I was going to read it, I would schedule a time to read it in my calendar. Yeah. If I wasn't going to read it, I'd stick it on the list of things I'm not doing.
Well, I'd like to offer a little twist on that, which is when, you and I have talked about this topic quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I did a little differently is on my to-do list is to update my website.
Mm-hmm.
But my to-do list, or on my calendar, updating the website had maybe 30 different things I wanted to accomplish. And after you and I talked for a long time, I changed the whole approach about how I was going to do it. So it went down to maybe like 10 critical things
mm-hmm.
that really would make this website get off the ground.
Right.
Otherwise, those things were just going to keep me from moving to the next stage. So
right.
I believe that it's really helpful.
Yeah. In other words, you broke the project down. You determined what you was going to do.
Right.
Scheduled some time to work on that. You looked at what you were not going to do.
Right.
and put that on the list of things you weren't going to do.
I want to break in here and remind our listeners that you can talk to Ralph and Mary directly about your own concerns about time management. Just give us a call at 310-715-6709. We're talking with Ralph White and Mary Mullenhoff from Possibilities Unlimited, and they are talking with each other about time management. Mary, what other kinds of things are involved here?
Well, Ralph just talked a little bit about the fact that he puts everything on Outlook. And one of my other questions were, what do you believe, in addition to Outlook, to be one of the most effective time management tools? Now, I know some business people use Lotus Notes a lot.
Right.
And so, just...
Okay, well, I in the radar screen aspect of the system, it's anything that's going to keep it in front of you. It's anything that's going to keep you aware of it. So I use Outlook, but it's not, Lotus Notes is fine. It's a PDA is fine. It's, I call it the calendar scoreboard. It's whatever kind of a calendar, one calendar. Some people go with, I got a calendar on my, refrigerator. I got a calendar at work. I got a calendar in my car. You should have one calendar and have it with you. If you're managing time, you should have one system. Now, when I say one system, it could be a computer system that you synchronize with your PDA. But if you're going to manage your time, if somebody asks you a question, can we meet on Friday at 2:00? In order to answer that question, you got to have your system available. You got to be able to look at your calendar and to answer that question. So if you're going to talk about your time, you got to be able to have access to whatever the tool is that you manage your time with. So in the radar screen aspect of it, I look at it may be whatever tool you're using to keep keep it in front of you. It can be meeting agendas. It could be project management tools. It can be data management systems. It's however you keep information in front of yourself or in your business, however you manage that information.
Okay, so I know we've talked about this a couple of times also, the fact that you believe in just one calendar.
Yes.
For all your family stuff, your personal. Now, what if it is Lotus Notes that you use? Okay, so that's everybody in the company has access to that. But you want to schedule some things about picking up your kids or whatever, and you want to put it in the same calendar, but it's not something you want everyone to have access.
Okay,
so
well
what
then,
would you recommend?
then I'd print it out, because you want to, somehow you've got to create a system. I don't want, you don't want your personal life on the company calendar.
Right.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that. You find some, print it out to where you're somehow coordinating it, because I feel that, if you got to coordinate, you got to coordinate your business life and your personal life. You got to coordinate your life, your calendar, and your spouse's calendar. In today's world, you've got to coordinate your calendar, your kids' calendar, your spouse's calendar. You've got to synchronize all of that. In order to, again, it's people just expect all of these things to happen. Talk to a soccer mom. I mean, she's with two kids. She's got to synchronize two kids' calendars, her calendar, her husband's calendar, and his work calendar. And if they don't synchronize it, they never see each other. And then there's no relationship. So it's like you've got to, and it isn't just going to magically happen. Nothing happens unless you put it in time. You want to look at your calendar as a picture of the results that you're going to have in the future. If you want something to happen, you have to put it in your calendar.
Just want to remind you folks, the call-in number is 310-715-6709. Also want to remind you that you can learn more about us at Possibilities Unlimited by visiting our website, www.consultingtowin.com. Through that website, you can email us topics that you're interested in us talking about on the radio. We would welcome your suggestions, and also if you have questions about your business, you can email those there in addition to calling into the show. And Mary, I know that we've been talking a lot about personal time management. What about for your business?
Yeah, I had a a question here about, I just wanted to get from Ralph your definition of success in both personal time management, goal setting and time management.
Goal setting and time management. Okay, so if you have a goal, and everybody establishes some sort of goals, you want to look at what are the actions that it's going to take to accomplish that goal. Let's say, for instance, in business you establish a sales goal, and you're going to sell a certain volume of products, or you're a doctor and or a lawyer, you're going to sell a certain volume of business. Okay, you look at how many sales calls is it going to take to produce that result. You look at what is your close ratio. Let's say that I close 50% of the business. Out of every sales call I make, on the phone, I close 50% of them. Then I look at what is the value of a sales call. And let's say that a value of a sales call is, if I close a call, it's worth $200. Okay, and I close 50% of them. So then I look at how much income I'm looking for, what my goal is. That will determine how many. I divide that by the number of calls that I need to make, so I can establish the number of calls. I can plug that into my calendar based on my close ratio, so I can actually plug into my calendar the number of calls that I need to make in order to accomplish that. And I actually plug that into the calendar, schedule those calls, and then I start looking for names for people to call. I plug it in as sales call, and then I start looking for names to change sales call into that person's names. So you can build your goals into the calendar in that way.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you about some of the key ways to eliminate procrastination and feeling unable to get started on an action item. I know that you were talking about, actions need to, you can do all this great goal setting and putting things on your calendar, but then for people with this procrastination problem, how do they, stop from feeling stuck?
Well, procrastination usually comes from people thinking it has to be perfect. It's more tied to perfection. And I like to shift that from, perfection. I like to shift it to a thinking of it's a work in process. That it's, I have that affliction. And if I tie it to it has to be perfect, then once you tie it to it has to be perfect, then it's like, okay, if it has to be perfect, then I don't really want to start it because I know it's not going to be perfect, so why bother to start? And if I don't start, then I'm free from it having to be perfect. So if I change that to where I'm working on a prototype, or I'm working on, it's a work in process, or I'm doing a draft, or it's just a rough sketch, then it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a preliminary beginning. It's like it's a draft. It's not anything really important. So if I'm just scribbling it on a piece of paper, I might even just throw it in the trash. So there's nothing, it doesn't mean anything. So that gives me the ability to just start it. So it's really shifting how you relate to it. How we perform is very much related to how the situation occurs to us. And if we can shift how we relate to the situation, it'll shift how we perform. If we can give up our attachment that it has to be a certain way, if we can free ourselves up from that it's got to be perfect, that'll free up the procrastination. Also, if we can chunk it down, like you did with your website, when you look at this huge mountain of this website that's got to be perfect, and it's got to be, it's got to be, the punctuation's got to be perfect, and it's got to represent this beautiful website that's, everybody in the world is going to look at it and say, that's Mary, and they're going to judge you by it, and they're going to look down and check everything out on it, and and it's going to be on the internet, and I mean, when you build up that conversation, I mean, just the thoughts of all of those things is like, I'm better off to take it down and not do it than to live with all of those thoughts. And if you can shift your thinking to where I'm just going to do this little piece and then work on it as a work in process, then you're freed up to begin. And once you begin the process, then you start to like, well, oh, I like this. This looks nice. Oh, this looks, and then you sort of get addicted to the process. It's chunking it down. Again, it goes back to putting it in your calendar. It's people look at a project like, oh, this is a 50-hour project and I'd have to do it all this week. If we can break it down to putting it into smaller pieces. I schedule projects where it's like I'm going to be working on this project every week ongoingly, and I'll just schedule an hour a week or a half hour a week on this project. And at the end of that half hour, I stop, and I'll come back to it next week.
Boy, I think that's really a profound insight, because I think procrastination and that all those kinds of time management issues really affect not only our business but our personal life as well. And if you can take that concept with things even like doing the laundry, which I know I procrastinate on, up to those big projects that Ralph is talking about that really intimidate us getting started. That really helps a lot to kind of change your relationship with it and not worry about it being perfect.
Yeah, and another thing I see with on the side of the personal training people that I work with, a lot of times there's a great and a tremendous amount of guilt that they feel when they don't get things done. Whether it's they spent more time on the project at work and so they're guilty they didn't see their kids, or they spent more time with their kids and then they feel bad that they didn't, they blew off their workout and didn't schedule any time for themselves.
Right.
And so it's this interesting kind of dynamic that I think needs to happen, which is what you're talking about. This cutting everything into chunks, but having it be part of your entire life.
Right. It's really people looking at, to win the game of business, it isn't doing one thing really well. It really has to do with doing many things well. It's really looking at, can you get, it's really like looking at your calendar and saying, I got to get a lot of little particles in here, and I got to get them all in here every week. It isn't like, okay, I'm going to fill my week with sales and make lots of sales, but if I don't deliver, I'm not going to win the game. I have to have sales. I have to have production. I have to have delivery. I have to have collections. I have to have accounting. I have to have all of those pieces in there. I have to have exercise. I have to have sleep. I have to have time with my relationship. I have to have time with my kids. I have to have all of that into my life in order to have it balanced, in order to win the game.
Yeah.
And
I think we all fall into just thinking it's going to happen.
Right.
Without having to really schedule it.
Right.
But that's not the way we should do it, right?
Yeah. I'm talking to a gentleman
it's like giving up hope.
Yeah.
Giving up the fact that
Right.
hoping it'll happen. Will
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm working with a client that is fighting putting, he uses a calendar on his desk, and him and his wife just had a new baby, and he's just fascinated with this baby, and he's like, he does not want to use a PDA or the computer. He just does not want to do it, but he's realizing he needs to use a better system. And
so he could schedule in time with his baby.
Exactly. He wants more time with his family.
That's great.
But it's got to, he's fighting. He says it sounds so restrictive, and people say, I just don't want my life so restricted. But it's like, in the determining what not to do, there's actually 4 elements of that. There's the, what I'm not doing. And then there's what I'm never going to do. I actually have a list of things of what I'm never going to do. There's things that it's like, okay, I'm never going to do that. And and I sometimes I hold on to things like, okay, I think I may want to do that sometime, and then I push it over on this list. No, I'm never going to do that, and then I'll finally delete it. It's sort of like cleaning your closet. It's like clothes say, well, I'm not going to wear those, but I don't want to throw them out.
Right.
Okay, well, this is when you finally put them in the Goodwill and you get rid of them. So those things, things in life, or books that you hold on to, and then you say, well, I'm never going to read those books, and then finally you'll just get rid of them. Mm-hmm. So there's things in life that go into that category. And then there's an element of things that you delegate. So that you look at, here's the things that I'm going to delegate. They were originally on my list, but I'm going to give them to somebody else. They belong in somebody else's calendar.
Okay, I want you to expand on that, because in talking to people, and I have a couple of clients in this area where they feel like I'm the only one who can do this. I can't do it right now. It's important. It's got to get done. But when I'm hearing what the situation is from the client, I think, wow, that sounds like something somebody else could probably do.
Right.
How do you work with somebody to help them let go of the fact that that really is a task they could let somebody else do?
Okay, well, the things that stop people from delegating are the conversations that are going on in their mind. And those conversations are, I'm the only one. See, it's usually, I can do it faster than anyone else. I can do it better than anyone else. Or I can do it cheaper than anyone else. And it will take me longer to train somebody else to do it than it would do it myself. And then there's another one that if I give it to somebody else and they do it wrong, I'll have to take the heat for it.
Or do it again.
Or do it,
Do it over.
Or the customer will come back and be upset with me. Okay, those are the conversations that stop them from handing it off. Okay, now the reality is that the work can be done to a standard. It may not be done the same as you can do it. It may be not done as well as you can do it. But it can be done to a standard, an acceptable standard by someone else. So your job is to establish the standard, and then that someone else can do it too. And if you establish the standard, this is what is the acceptable standard, most likely someone else can figure out how to do it to that standard if you establish the standard.
Okay. I know that's a problem that many business owners and managers face every single day, trying to fit it all in. We'd love to hear from you and hear what your particular challenges are in the area of time management. So give us a call here at 310-715-6709. You can talk to Ralph White and Mary Mullenhoff and get some insight on your particular issue. Also want to remind you to check us out on the web. We are at www.consultingtowin.com. That's consulting, the number 2, win.com. And Ralph, maybe this is a good time for us to tell our listeners about the contest that we're going to have coming up
Yes.
at Possibilities Unlimited. In the next month, we want to invite all our listeners here at New Day Talk Radio to enter a drawing for a free 2-session business health checkup. One lucky winner is going to have the chance to bring their business to us at Possibilities Unlimited and receive an in-depth analysis of where you're winning, because at Possibilities Unlimited, we're all about you winning the game of business life. And we'll also look at maybe where you need to do a little more training to stay in the game of business life. So how do you enter this contest? What we want you to do is email us a little note that has 3 things that you are willing to commit to putting into your calendar, things that you want to challenge yourself to time manage that will make an impact on your business. We want to know what you think those 3 things are. And you can email them to me at leanne@consultingtowin.com. And that's LEEANN at consulting, the number 2.com. So we invite you to join our contest. You will get a chance to work with either Mary or myself or our other colleague Bonnie Landau to take a look at your business health checkup, and we'll announce our winner at the end of July. So, Mary, what are some other things that business owners come up against when they're trying to manage their time?
Well, this is interesting because this was always a challenge. The question I'm going to ask now, it's about meetings. I mean, meetings were, people would have an agenda, but you would always have, people in a meeting, say when there's 3 or 4 or 5 people in a meeting, and everyone's got their own agenda, regardless of what the written agenda is on the schedule.
Right.
So what are some, ways to handle meetings effectively so they start and end on time and actually accomplish their goal while, sort of acknowledging people's other needs?
Well, I like to have meetings on management teams to where they rotate the leadership of the meeting to where and everybody knows this in advance. There's a big difference when the managers of the meeting know that, I'm listening from a standpoint that next week I'm leading. So if the management, and you build leaders in the company when you do that, you have an established agenda where you're looking at what's working, what's not working, and then what actions we're going to take to impact that, what's not working. But you're in the company, and then you have accountabilities of what's going to be accomplished between now and the next meeting, and then who's accountable for that. But and so you have an established agenda, and you have accountabilities, and who's accountable for it, and the action items. So it's not we're just sitting talking about things. We have actions that are going to take place between meetings.
Well, what I like about that is that by having the team leader rotate, each person in that meeting understands the challenge of leading a meeting.
Exactly.
So hopefully that would, in the back of their mind, say, okay, we're going to help this guy along instead of, provide obstacles.
Right, and it builds leadership in the meeting.
Just got handed a note that we've had a tweet from one of our listeners
who
has a question.
Oh, great.
So John gave us a tweet on Twitter, and he says that his problem is saying no to people and the fact that his phone is constantly ringing. When you've got your things scheduled in your calendar, but you have interruptions and you have a hard time saying no, what's the best approach?
Well, there's a thing called voicemail.
You mean just don't answer?
Right. You don't answer the phone. You set scheduled times. You can actually put on your voicemail, I return calls between a certain period of time. You schedule, again, it goes back to scheduling in your calendar. In other words, you look at your schedule and you say, okay, I'm going to return calls between, you look at I'm going to return calls between 9 and 10 in the morning and 3 and 4 in the afternoon. You set up your day to win. You look at how, you just start designing a winning day. People say, well, I get constant interruptions from emails. Well, you can turn off the monitor. There's a button on the front where you can actually turn off the monitor and you can't see the emails if the monitor is off. And therefore you're not interrupted. So you start to plan your day to work for you. So you can actually schedule a period of time in the morning and then in the afternoon to respond to emails. You can actually schedule time to handle the interruptions from your employees. You start to design the day to work for you. And then what will happen is you can actually start to get the circumstances to line up with your design. For example, I worked with a manager that read her emails twice a day. Okay, so once in the morning, once in the afternoon. So I knew that, and responded twice a day. So I knew that if I communicated before the morning period, I get a response in the morning. And then I knew the time that she responded in the afternoon. So I knew when I would get a response to my emails. If I didn't make it in by